So last week I decided to make a short video talking about my sort of Lamellar armor, and this time I'll be talking a bit more about it, and I'll also be talking a bit about how to make your own and the process of making your own armor, because this took me 4 years and I'm still not finished with it. So maybe you can learn from a couple of my mistakes and make your own suit. But if you're not planning on making your own, I'll also just be talking about Lamellar armor in general, what makes it so unique, and also why it's not very common in Europe. So, but to understand Lamellar armor, we have to go back to the beginning and also understand what is Lamellar armor. So Lamellar armor is a type of armor which consists of small plates of a material. Usually this material will be metals such as steel, wrought iron, brass, bronze, something like that. But it's also sometimes made out of leather scales or also rawhide. For instance, in Japan there's a lot of rawhide Lamellar armor going around. And also one other material it can be made out of its bone, but I will get back to that. Because the very first suit of armor we actually have archaeological evidence of is a suit of Lamellar armor. In Siberia they have found a suit of bone armor which was made out of bone plates laced together using cordage. So the very first actual armor we have found is in fact Lamellar armor. It may very well have been more common at the time, but the problem is with any biological materials such as leather, cloth, bone, anything like that, it doesn't really keep well in the ground for thousands of years. So the fact that they found a piece of suit of bone armor is actually pretty damn impressive. And we're getting into the area of speculation here, but probably Lamellar armor will not have been the very first type of armor. I expect simple leather shirts or jerkins or rawhide shirts would have been the very first kind of armor, but we don't have any archaeological evidence of those, and we only have the archaeological evidence of the bone Lamellar armor. So, and we also start seeing the metal Lamellar armor in the time of the ancient Assyrians. So Iron Age Assyrians, they have quite a few depictions of their soldiers actually donning what looks like Lamellar armor, and the way we distinct Lamellar and scale armor on pictures or depictions is usually the way it's oriented. So if it's downwards pointing scales, we usually call it scale armor, and scale armor is also actually sewn onto a cloth backing and not laced together as Lamellar armor would be. So this is the important distinction. Scale armor is usually pointing downwards and it's fixed to a cloth or leather shirt, and Lamellar armor is just loose lamellae, as they are called, these individual plates laced onto each other. And after the Assyrians, we also see the ancient Greeks using them. This time they would have mostly been made out of brass, and that's at least the archaeological finds of Lamellar armor they have from the time. And later in the Roman times, the Romans actually wore a lot of scale armor. They called it lorica squamata, and it was like Lamellar armor, but and some suits of scale armor are actually very much like Lamellar armor, also in the way the plates are attached to each other to prevent a blade from coming from the underside and just jabbing up and going under a plate. They would also fasten the plates against each other. This looks a bit like Lamellar armor, but it still falls into the realm of scale armor. And also the reason this distinction between pointing upwards and pointing downwards is because lamellar armor a lot of the time is pointing upwards for a reason. And this reason is, at least that's what historians think now, is that lamellar armor is primarily a type of armor used by the cavalry. And the cavalry, because they're on top of a pretty big horse, they aren't very afraid of having someone come with a strike from above and trying to slip under or over one of these lamellar plates. You of course have to worry a lot more about spears and swords and any other kinds of piercing weapons coming from under. And the way these plates are interlinked is that they are pretty much like roof tiles in that they deflect anything that's coming upward. So if you'd have a spear tip traveling upwards, hits your lamellar armor, it's not going to get caught in anything, it's just going to slip upwards. And if you're lucky, it's not going to go up into your face and it will just be deflected. But if something were to come from above, such as a sword tip or something, it could theoretically get in between your plates. But my plates overlap in such a way that it's practically impossible to actually get the blade to go into my body, because the angle it will go into the plate will be so vertical that it probably won't even damage any soft tissue, especially now that I'm wearing cloth armor underneath. You definitely want to be wearing some type of cloth armor under this, at least a thick kaftan, something like that. So it actually gives you a lot of protection even from stabs from above. And this sometimes is a problem with skill armor, and sometimes the skills aren't actually attached to one another, so you have the risk of someone actually getting a blade under. But I'm getting sidetracked, because after the Roman ages, Roman times, we have the migration period, and we also see this Germanic tribe called the Langobards wear some lamellar armor. This is a bit of a side note. But in the rest of Europe, lamellar armor is very uncommon. We see a lot of chainmail armor, and that is very common until eventually we start seeing full plate armor. But even then, chainmail armor will probably still be protecting your armpits. But it won't cover your entire body as it did in the early medieval times. And for instance, Frankish knights would have worn full body suits of chainmail. That wouldn't have happened during the late medieval period. But it's not entirely clear why lamellar armor really didn't catch on in Europe, because it really did catch on in most other places, especially in the Middle East, in Asia. Also the Eastern Vikings, the Kievan Rus, they probably adopted lamellar armor from the Slavic peoples they conquered. And Japan, India, China, you see a lot of lamellar armor being worn. But not in Europe, and there are multiple angles on this. But mostly the thing that is believed about why lamellar armor really was uncommon in Europe is because in Europe people really didn't feel the need to use it because they had chainmail and they were perfectly happy with their riveted chainmail. Because the thing with lamellar is it's in no way as flexible as a suit of riveted mail. This has both upsides and downsides, but the downsides being is there's only a certain amount of body parts you can actually cover with lamellar. So what I have is a simple cuirass, basically a chest plate and a back plate made of lamellar. and I don't even have any shoulder plates. This model, it's sort of speculative because we don't have any surviving complete suits of Lamellar from the early medieval period. So this is pretty much the way I designed this thing. So this may not have been as historically accurate as I'd hoped, but we'll probably never know because we only find the loose plates. But the thing is, if you want to, for instance, protect your armpits, and armpits historically always been a good spot to just stab someone, especially if they're wearing armor, because you have to wear something here that is very flexible, and Lamellar armor is just not going to be able to do that. So you're going to require chainmail, because chainmail fits very closely to the skin, and you are very, very mobile in it. So if you were to wear a chainmail gurney, you would have been very much better protected than I would have been wearing only my Lamellar chest plate. And you can also see that actually my entire chest isn't actually protected, because to be able to still make to hold the sword and actually make very nimble movements and keep a very wide range of movement, I've had to keep this part as small as it is, because if I'd have added more plates on both sides, I probably would have limited my range of movement a lot. So that's a drawback with Lamellar. It will flex somewhat, but there's a limit to how much flex it has, and you don't see this with chainmail. You could just move whichever way you wanted wearing a full chainmail shirt. But having said that, the thing with Lamellar is the places you are wearing it, it will actually protect them better than chainmail will. Chainmail is, I wouldn't say notoriously bad, but it's notorious for not protecting you a lot against blunt force, because it fits so loosely on your body. It doesn't actually divert the force of a sword or an axe strike or any blunt weapon as these metal plates would. So a lot of the force of that strike would still just be transferred into your body and give you broken bones, or at least very nasty wounds. So when it comes to blunt force, you're actually better off wearing Lamellar. But then again, there's also the economy of armor, because armor is, historically speaking, very expensive. A full suit of chainmail, of riveted chainmail, like Norman knights would have worn, it would have costed many times the yearly wage of a simple laborer. And if you pay that much for a suit of armor, you also want something that is durable, that you don't have to replace all the time or repair all the time, or go to a smith and have him repair it. And chainmail is perfect when it comes to this, because basically all the maintenance you need to do is it rusty, you can just shake it and the rust will just literally fall off. So if you put it somewhere that has been damp for a long time, you just shake it, apply some oil, good as gold. Lamellar armor, on the other hand, you have all these individual plates, and this would have been made of iron or steel, so this would rust. So you'd have to spend time cleaning the plates, maintaining your armor. The lacing would have probably been made out of leather or rawhide, or if you're very rich and you live somewhere near the east, it could also have been made out of silk. But leather and rawhide, they tend to dry, they can rot, mold can go on it. So you get the idea that there's quite a bit of maintenance involved in Lamellar armor. And if your Lamellar armor were to get damaged, you'd have to unlace your entire row of Lamellar to get to the damaged plate and replace it. So it's pretty labor intensive if you have to do this a lot. If you're going from battle to battle and you have to replace plates, or some of the lacing it gets cut through or it gets damaged, you find yourself having to pretty much rebuild your armor all the time. Whereas with chainmail, you have the added benefit that you can just, if a link breaks off, you can just add a new link. And spare links for your chainmail that would have been standard equipment for many soldiers, especially Romans. We actually know they had spare links with them to repair their armor in the field. And this way you can actually get your chainmail to last quite a long while. I've even heard people say that it's very possible that some of the chainmail armor that was going around during the early Middle Ages was actually still left over from the Romans, because you can pretty much keep on replacing rings in your Lamellar armor, and you can keep going indefinitely until it's not the same piece of chainmail armor anymore. But on to making your own, because that is another interesting thing. I will show you the back side of the plates, actually, how this is laced. So you can see superb amount of flex this gives as opposed to like plate armor. And this is, I believe, I calculated it once, it's about 300 plates, and each of these plates have to be made and drilled individually. So I bought a piece of stainless steel plate. I know stainless steel isn't that going to be historically accurate, but I at that time couldn't get my hands on 1mm thick mild steel. And you might ask, well, 1mm thick, that's really thin. How is it going to protect you? Well, actually it protects you pretty damn well. It's because the small plates, they interlock in such a way that the force actually from a strike or something gets diverted, and it won't be caught by a single plate, but multiple plates will actually catch and cushion the blow. So I've done some ballistic testing with it. We hit it with long swords while I was wearing it with this under it, of course, and it's actually very comfortable to wear. And almost didn't actually suffer any pain from getting hit with the longsword, and the guy was just going at it full force. So when it comes to cushioning blows, it's pretty damn decent. But to make your own suit of Lamellar armor, you're going to need a bunch of things. Of course, the plate material. The plate material itself, it cost me about 30 euros, so it's not very expensive. The most intensive part is, of course, making it. It's very labor intensive. You're also going to need a simple drill press, and I use a sanding or a grinding wheel to actually shape the plates, because I cut them square. And you have to grind them until they're round, though don't have to. Not every type of Lamellar armor actually used plates that are round at the top. They might have just been square. They might have been a kind of ellipse shape. There are many different shapes of Lamellar, but this is one of the easiest ones. The easiest, of course, being just square plates. But I like the look of having this rounded top, because this is also based upon an original find from a Turkmen Lamellar armor. And when you have your drill press and your steel plates, really make sure that if you make the first design of the plate, make it well. Because what I did, I made the first design and I calculated it should be about this far, the hole should be about this far from the edge, and so and so. And I made these plates, and I made this one plate and I used it to draw all the other plates. But the plate was a little bit a little bit crooked, so it wasn't completely straight. There was more material to the left side than the right side of it, so all my plates end up being a little bit lopsided. So definitely, if you make your own, make sure the plate you are basing all the other plates off of, because it's very easy to just grab your plate, get the piece of steel and just start drawing it with a marker. Make sure that the first piece you use is a good piece, because otherwise all your other pieces will have the same imperfection. But apart from that, there's not a lot of special tooling you're gonna need. It's just going to be a lot of elbow grease. And when it comes to, as soon as you actually have the plates and to bind them together, there are actually patterns available on the internet. I'll post a link below. This is the site I based my pattern of lacing off of, and it works very well. And it's actually not very hard. But if you lace these, also make sure you have the right material to lace them. I first started off with paracord. Paracord is superb because it's very cheap and just for trying out, but it looks like shit if you have actually assembled the piece. So I opted for using waxed cotton in this case, and I got a big roll of about 80 meters of waxed cotton. I didn't use it all, but I got pretty close actually. But really make sure that the cordage is a good kind of cordage, because waxed cotton, it looks like leather because it's shiny and it's nice brown color. But you can also use actual leather, but this is going to be a lot more expensive, and you're probably going to spend a lot more on the lacing than on the plates itself in that case. So be prepared for that. Also, when you use stainless steel, because it has the benefit of not actually needing maintenance, there is actually a good reason to not use it, which is if you try to drill stainless steel, it's very tough and it's going to make your drills blunt very quickly, and it'll also overheat your drills very quickly. If you use mild steel, you'll drill like that, it'll drill like a dream. Stainless steel, on the other hand, is going to give you a lot more problems, and you gotta find someone who can sharpen your drill bits. And to finish the armor, I added a simple leather edge. So this is just a very simple long strip of leather with holes punched in it. I have one of these leather punches. Works easily, just align it over the hole in your lamellar. And that'll make it a lot easier to make the leather, what do you call it, the edge around it, and it will make your armor a lot more comfortable. It also looks a lot better than no edge, though the historical examples of lamellar armor that have actually survived that I've seen, they didn't actually use the leather edge, but I think it goes without saying that they probably would have used it, especially anywhere where your body would be making contact, just to prevent chafing, because these lamellar plates can be quite sharp, especially if you don't put a lot of effort in sanding them down and making them less sharp. So that's a thing to keep in mind. And well, lastly, also, before you start making your lamellar armor, you should really consider the materials you're going to use, because halfway down the project I decided, you know what, mild steel would actually have been a lot better, but I was already gone down the road of using stainless steel. I already had the material, I had the stuff, and it probably cost me a lot more time than if I would have used mild steel in the first place. So that's a thing to consider when making your lamellar armor, if you're gonna make one, of course. But well, those were my 2 cents on the use of lamellar armor. I would say that I'm by no means an expert on this subject, so definitely don't take all this from me. but these are just my 2 cents and what I think, and also some of my experience while making lamellar armor myself. And if some of you are actually interested in making lamellar armor, you can also ask me some more questions, and I'll be sure to place a link down below talking that is actually about making lamellar armor, what you consider for your lacing, and patterns of lamellar you can use. So be sure to take a look at that as well.